Hey everybody, and welcome back to Digital Artcast. I'm glad that you are returning for another episode. It really makes me happy that you guys want to come back each and every week that we do an interview. I've definitely noticed in the last couple of episodes that the numbers have been spiking a bit, and it's been good to see that people have taken more interest in the show. So welcome to people new and old. If you're returning for the 50th time, if you're just finding us right now, I'm glad that you've popped along. It really does mean a lot to me that you listen to these podcasts and make it part of your day. I hope everybody out there is still staying safe. Of course, we're still in this lockdown phase for some people, and of course it's going to be troubling and trying during these weird times. But yeah, these episodes are coming thick and fast, and I'm hoping that they're keeping you sane and productive on whatever you're working on. Today, I have a really great guest to join me. This particular guest I met back at Playgrounds a couple of years ago in Eindhoven, and yeah, it was just a pleasure to meet the guy. And I know that I've really kept on to his work for the last couple of years and watched his progress. And we finally thought, since he's just had another big milestone, we would bring him on and talk to him about his process and everything in between. So today, please welcome me and bringing along our new guest, that is Danar Worya. Hey, Danar.
Hey, man. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. So specifically the milestone we're talking about is that The Last of Us 2 has just came out. Congratulations on that to you and the team.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely blown up. The game's everywhere. I think, as far as I know, with NPR recently, it just passed, I think, 4 million sales. So doing really, really well. I'm sure that the team and everybody else is super excited about that, including the guys at One Pixel Brush. But of course, you left One Pixel Brush a wee while back. You're freelancing specifically for yourself now. So you've done so much in such a short span of time, it seems, because Eindhoven Playgrounds, I think that was 2017, I think was when I was there. So yeah, so that was a while back. So, but yeah, just in a short couple of years, you've done a lot of work. So, so where did it all start from you? Because I don't know a lot about your background, I don't know if anybody else knows, but did you go to school specifically for art? Or?
It actually started for me. So my parents, so I'm originally from Kurdistan, Iraq. My parents came here in 97, so, first few things that I saw on TV and back in that day was Fox Kids and Cartoon Network, and it was filled with rich, cartoons, which just pushed your imagination
X-Men.
As a kid. Exactly, X-Men, Spider-Man, all this stuff. And I always had interest in art. I always drew. I always loved to draw Dragon Ball stuff, but then it stopped for a couple of years, and then around 19, I actually went to graphic school design. Mm-hmm. I took graphic design for 2 years, and I thought this is just not it for me. So I took a step back and reevaluated to see which direction I want to go. And I took another direction, which is called visualiseren in Dutch. That means visualizing. And the idea was basically kind of illustration, and so it was an illustration class and not necessarily a concept art. And one of my classmates introduced me to this term called concept art, and I just was blown away. I remember seeing Dan Lovisi stuff and Kekai, and
nice.
I was like, wow, this, the thing is the difference between now and then is then you can't just even imagine how somebody does something like that, of course. So
right.
It was so spectacular for me. And from that moment, I just knew I wanted to do this. So the first few things I did is all right, let's see who these guys are on DeviantArt. So it started from there, and then slowly but surely, I think around 2013, Facebook started to come up really, really well with artists. So everybody really got connected around that time. Right. And, through this and kind of getting connected with other people, and then finally being able to follow others. And this was all new back in the day. Now it's very normal, of course, but back in the day, this was so new and so great to actually see your favorite artist online. Mm-hmm. My biggest break I think I have two kind of steps which really helped me a lot. The first one was after I finished my graphic design, I went to another college or university, But the only reason I did that is just because I have Middle Eastern parents, and they were like, yeah, diploma is what you need. So I thought, like, all right, if I had to do that and make them happy, at least I'll do something towards art, you know?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, I got there. I met, so one of my teachers, her name is Sonia van Vuren. She's also an artist. She saw my work and she was like, man, what are you doing here? You have to already, be in the field. But obviously your work doesn't speak about your insecurities.
Right.
So and we artists are very insecure on a lot of moments. And, at that time I thought I wasn't ready. So she arranged an internship at Guerrilla Games.
Oh, nice.
Which is the studio who worked on Horizon 1, 2, Killzone.
Yeah.
And it slowly started from there, I think. I still wasn't at quality, so I just did prop design for an internship for 2-3 months, which was also in my own free time because the teachers were like, yeah, sorry, you can't do an internship. You're just at the first year.
So, right. Okay.
Yeah. So I asked them, like, all right, can I just do it in my free time? Because I just really wanted it, So fortunately, they said yes. It kind of showed me the first time how it is in-house within the industry,
Right.
So I think it's very important that artists in general should know the pipeline before actually taking on big projects.
And that's a huge first step as well, though. Like working in Guerrilla Games, it's in Amsterdam as well. But that's like the biggest studio in Netherlands. Really, it's one of the biggest in the industry. And at that time, were they working on? Was it Horizon you were working on at the time?
It was Horizon 1, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So crazy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was also weird because Guerrilla was always known for Killzone. So the moment I got there, I just see these happy imagery and like concept art.
Like Aloysius drawings lying up in the walls. And,
exactly. Yeah. It was fun to see. During these moments, I learned a lot about not just how to do art or like how to finish an art or how to use this tool or that tool. It's just like kind of more of human connection and like how to, you see people behave and act within the studio and you kind of try to learn and adapt and try to understand why they do this, or why they behave in a different, like in a certain way. Like, for example, I never took it personal if somebody came over when they talk to me as if they are cocky or something, because I knew like you never know, this person next to you maybe has like 20 calls a day, so obviously his head is a bit more heated than yours, so I never took stuff like that personal. And it was a great experience. After that, there was like a small period in my career, I think around 2014-15, which I didn't see art really. Like it didn't do me anything anymore, so I just let it go for like half year, 5 or 6, 7 months. Right. And then like IFCC started, I think the second time for IFCC, and I just bet all my money on that. Like I was like, all right, just have like 600-700 euros on pocket and you just buy one ticket and get there. And I knew that Shadi was going to be there.
Right.
So I just knew like, I just want to work for him. That's the thing. Right. Because for me, the cool thing about Shadi is also he was one of the first few Middle Eastern guys which actually worked in this industry and talked back to me and actually motivated me. It was like, yeah, do this, do that, So that was such a huge leap for me. And when I got to IFCC, it's just crazy to finally in person meet all these guys that you look up to for years and years to come. And even noticing that they like you as a person as well. So actually boosted up my confidence, not just about my art, but as a person as well, So, then I showed my portfolio to Shadi around that time. And obviously there were rows and rows of people, showing their work. Right. So I showed mine and he was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm taking a break right now from work, but I'm probably going to restart my company. And I think he said around November, something like that. And this was around the summer of 16. Yeah. Okay. Summer 2016.
Right.
I showed my stuff. I met a lot of guys. It was cool and all. I came back and for half a year, I didn't hear anything from him. And then he just he popped me a message. Actually, before that, funny story, I got a contract from another studio, which they, like the last minute they said, sorry, we don't need you anymore, we got somebody else. And then Shadi sent me a message like 5 hours later or something.
Oh,
what a chat!
Maybe it was Shadi. Maybe it was him that told the company not to hire you.
Don't hire him. He said, like, are you open to? Excuse me. He's like, are you open to work? I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, I've been ready, you know. Yeah. And without actually thinking about the idea of ready, you know, because I never worked professionally in the industry. Yeah. I did some smaller things, but never like in this capacity or this level of art.
Right. Yeah.
And I started, and I just did so horrible the first 2-3 weeks, I remember. And Shadi was super nice about it as well, so I'll never forget about that. Like, he knew which buttons to push from you, even if you failed a couple of times.
Right.
And he gave me this piece. The Star Wars piece was for a VR game, and you know, I was really struggling with it for a month, and I just couldn't, because the reason why I was struggling with it was I was looking at 1-pixel brushwork, and I was like, okay, I have to look at tutorials that Shadi made because that's the only way to do it. I never had the idea of every artist has their own approach.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So that just didn't even go through my head. And at that time, it was so hard for me. I even had a lot of sleepless nights, you know, and fortunately I have amazing colleagues, and still see them as good friends now, who, you know, like Jad Saber, Florent Lebrun, Balash, all of these guys, like, they really supported me mentally, and vice versa, of course. And so this was 3 weeks before. So I've been here at 1Pixel now for a month, finishing this image. We sent it finally, waited for feedback, and through a little bird, I heard that he was working on The Last of Us 2, and this was 2 weeks before the announcement. So the first with Ali playing the guitar.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, there's this Dutch saying which says, a no you already have, a yes you can get. So you already have a no, so you might as well try to get the yes.
Okay.
So I sent Shadi a message. I'm like, dude, you have to get me on Last of Us, man. Like, I'll do anything, you know. I'll even work free if I have to. And he was so cool about it. He's like, all right, let's see. I'll give you this image and see how far you can get with it. And you know, from that point on, the way I treated Last of Us is really not the way so far in my career, and that's like 4 years now, so it's not that far. I've never been so passionate about making images for a project as I've done for The Last of Us. Like, I treated every image as it's a personal image.
Right. So you have that connection when you're painting. I mean, that's a lot to take in, obviously, with your career and joining 1Pixel Brush and all this kind of stuff, going through your first job at Guerrilla. I mean, in essence, also, I think what's interesting is you touched on, you know, that Shadi also was Middle Eastern. Yeah. Was that something that was conscious to you throughout your career? Was that something that maybe came up through different conversations with artists or with companies? Was that something that people I think focused on, or
never? Like, it was never pointed to me or directed at me, like, you know, straight at my face, like, oh man, you're Middle Eastern, we don't like you, or nobody was really ever racist with me in that view. But it was just because when I grew up as a brown kid, and I grew up in the south of Holland, which is like mainly Dutch people, and you kind of create this image in your head thinking that you were less, you know. So it started from childhood behavior to how I actually feel now. Obviously I know better now, but at that time that's how I felt, because, you know, every person, if you look at like something on TV or a movie or whatever, when you see the person, you try to relate to that person, right? And the closer it gets to you, the better you feel about it.
Yeah, of course. But we just, as you know, we just done the Black Lives Matter podcast, and a lot of the guys who were talking, even Phil was talking about, you know, working for Marvel and working in Hollywood. He was saying that, you know, he was struggling as a kid to see him in positions where he was in a positive role, because a lot of people who were black at the time weren't in a lot of positive positions in acting and art and entertainment, anything like that. So I think it's a saying that, like, you can't be what you can't see. So to see people of your culture, your heritage in those positions of power is something that you're hoping that more people will want to see, because for Phil and a lot of the guys growing up, they never understood that black men could be artists, they could be, this or that, or, you didn't know the extent of what they could accomplish because they hadn't seen a lot of people in similar positions. So do you feel like that's something that you want to carry now as a successful artist in the entertainment industry? Would you want to carry that message that people from your background can be successful?
Oh, sure, for sure. And, it's for me, it's like, I also get why there's not a lot of people within my ethnicity in this industry, because most of the time their parents don't know anything about this industry.
Right.
And, everything that you don't know, you're afraid of course. So they'd rather not take the risk. Unfortunately, my parents did, but by doing, I think, especially with Middle Eastern people, I think Shadi agrees with that, the only way to show parents and schools and caregivers that this is an industry that kids can thrive is just the way they show sports and movies and stuff. It's like, showing that you can actually make an earning out of it, make a living out of it. And I think that's not that clear. And also that as a kid, when you want to do it, obviously you can't explain it to your parents as the way an adult can, who is in the industry.
Right. And making money and has a career and can sustain himself. And
exactly.
It's very common. And I think especially like you said, for minority parents, it's a very tough decision to try and push on that and make sure that even when we spoke to Henry Wong, he was saying the same thing with having Asian parents as well at the time, is that, although he went through the university track and done his masters, which, he probably felt at the time was more for his parents than him, but, he had to go that route because, they probably didn't agree with the direction he was going at the time. It's a very common thing, I think, with people who just don't understand the industry. I mean, also I've experienced that as a white man as well, is that, my parents, just because they're older, also thought that, I had to go to university, I had to have a degree in the wall. But I think specifically for people in those territories, it can be a very big struggle. But of course, now they're very supportive of what you're doing, right?
Yeah, obviously. I think it's all because of the fact that this industry almost was non-existent until Photoshop came along and Craig Mullen started doing this, and this is not that long, it's like what, 15, 20 years now almost.
Yeah, even the term concept art, I was going to say, is still new. Yeah,
photo bashing, for example. I remember when people were using photos, people said you're using textures.
Mm-hmm.
That term photo bashing didn't exist, for me at least, until The Last of Us came, the first game.
I mean, and that's such a weird thing, a conversation to have as well. Like even yesterday, I was talking to Peggy and a couple of people at over there where they've done some of the Apex skins for Apex Legends, and I was interested in one of the gun designs they'd done. I was like, oh yeah, is this have you drew this over a 3D base mesh? And I kind of got that response where they were like, yes, expecting maybe like, oh, I use 3D, oh my god. But I was like, oh no, that's really cool. Like that's a really awesome process. But then they talked about how they get that so much where people are like, oh, I use 3D. But then people who talk about like photo bashing in 3D as a negative thing are usually people who are not in production environments where they understand why these things are used, right?
Yeah, I think for me personally, if Da Vinci would live right now, you think he wouldn't use ZBrush or VR, or it's just you have to go with the tools that are made. You have to go with the time. You can't, by saying, and I've heard this many times before where people are like, using photos is not art, or if you're not painting, it's not art. And I'm like, first of all, when I see a movie, when I see a good movie, right, I never think like, but wait a minute, they used green screen. That's not real art. That's not real filmmaking. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's all about the end production, and concept art is a production. Like the idea itself is about making production, right?
Right.
And art, for me, you can't define what art means, because if that's the case, if you feel like only painting with the hand is real art, then I feel like, all right, you shouldn't drive a car and just go back to driving donkeys and horses, because that's also the traditional way of transportation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think it's interesting as well when people talk about even something like using reference, and then you point out to them, you're like, when Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, he had a person sitting in front of him.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
He didn't paint it for imagination. There was physically somebody there who he copied their face onto a canvas. You know what I mean? That's how it works.
Honestly, going back to this, it's like the biggest learning, like the biggest thing I got out of Last of Us is the idea of reference. And how I learned from that. That's the biggest thing I learned from this whole project is how important reference is, because like I also noticed what I personally like as well is like as long as your image stays true to life and nature, as in your lighting is correct, you know, the growth of things are correct, the way it breaks are correct. So everything that looks natural, your image will automatically stand out way better.
Like, I mean, I was going to say, because you were using a lot of Blender in this process as well, right?
Yeah. I actually halfway through I switched to Blender. First I was with Cinema 4D with Octane render, but it just wasn't my preference. And then Jama convinced us, me, Florent, Lebrun, Jad, Saber, and Balazs, and every other OPB guy. He convinced us to use Blender, and this was before the whole hype Blender thing. So, there was just like Blender Guru's tutorial, bless his soul.
Yeah, just the quality on some of the images is like, I think for me it was impossible to think that Blender could do this because I've never really dived into the depths of what Blender is truly capable of. But there was one painting I think came out really early on when they were announcing stuff, and it was the Killzone approach. It's the one where Ellie's with the horse, and I was just absolutely blown away. Like even breaking down that image, I mean, so that was mostly a 3D scene, like in real time Blender. And then were you like, how much paint over were you doing on these projects?
That Killzone approach is actually like 85% photo bashing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So interesting. It depends, right? Usually when it's outdoors. So I got this advice from Eitan Zana. He told me what he usually does. It's like the 80-20% rule. When it's interior, you do 80% 3D, 20% 2D. When it's exterior, you do 80% 2D, 20% 3D, because organic forms tend to look way more natural when you're using photos or you're painting over. And hard surface forms, you can't like calculate inside room interior better than with 3D software like Blender.
Right. Okay. So most of your scenes that were external were done mostly with photos and photo bashing, and then the interior stuff was more 3D. Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay. So I mean, you talked about using reference. That's a really interesting part, because obviously I think where I fell down as an artist for a lot of years was the fact that I just wasn't using enough reference. I mean, I initially thought, maybe 2 or 3 images would suffice, but then I started diving into PureRef and seeing other people's PureRef boards, and some guys who were doing projects had like over 200 images, and they had them in groups in different parts of the board so they could go to specific different images. But how were you approaching, like for that one we were just talking about, the Killzone approach? What was the reference really you were using, or what was the feel you were trying to accomplish using that reference?
So the kind of work method I got to learn while working on The Last of Us was we usually got a brief. Shadi was explaining us how the brief works and stuff. So it was from Naughty Dog we got the brief. Shadi sometimes gave like a scribble, or at the end he just gave the note to us because he trusted us after 2-3 years on the project. And what happened then is first thing I do is reference searching. So that means like, all right, I look at the image, I look at the references that they give. So sometimes like they showed like 2-3 images of, all right, for example, for Killzone approach was like, it's a Wyoming place, it's open, there's woods chopped off, and Ellie's walking there with a horse.
Right.
That's the only thing I got, right? And based on that, first thing I saw Wyoming, so I typed in Wyoming, took like 2-3 hours. So I spent like maybe a day just on reference search in the amount of hours. So like I make folders like reference folder, I make like a Wyoming folder, broken, damaged, collapsed building folders. So now I have like a whole folder of images that is divide it in different folders, like aerial, alphas, ancient architecture. And usually when I, cut out like a tree part or something, I tend to save that alpha as well so that I can reuse it later for another image. And I don't have to, keep searching for images.
Right.
So once I do the reference search, and like this is a shit ton of image, and obviously once I'm doing the reference search, I tend to see cool ideas, oh damn, that's actually pretty cool. I didn't know, wood broke like that, or I didn't know trees grow like that. So while you're doing the reference search, you're actually adding more life to your image and in your brain. And once that started, depending on which method I use, let's say we take 3D from now. For now, I have like I take like one good image. Like let's say if I have an interior bar or something, I tend to find one good bar that looks pretty cool in my eyes, set design stuff and wise, and then I try to copy that as close as possible in the beginning stage, so that they already did the work for me. They know how a bar is supposed to look like. As soon as I do it myself, I have never had a bar. I have never had people in bars. So once I do it myself, it looks stiff. But once I look at the reference of a photo of a bar, I kind of look like, oh, cool, there's actually a glass there. Or, oh, yeah, of course, people maybe smoke there. Or, all these small elements you just pick from one photo. And then you just copy that into your image and tweak it a little.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself is just such an in-depth process, I think, even for one image. And I think that's where people usually don't understand how much work goes into something like that. You could spend, I mean, again, we're using the one image as a reference, but maybe just in general, how long were you spending on one image? Like, weeks or months? Or
I think in the beginning, a lot.
Right.
I had images where it took me like 45, 50 hours. And as slowly I got better, it just took me less. And I think my last image took me like 25 hours. Like 25, 20 was in the low moments of hours, you know what I mean? So usually if you get a full Vista shot or something, and it depends on what kind of images, like a Vista shot usually is a bit harder to grab, to do, in my opinion, than an interior. So it just depends on what kind of image you have. But I would say 30 is a good midpoint. Like,
yeah.
If you could do something in 25, and this is of course very illustration type of, so it looks super realistic. We're taking account of everything, making it as realistic as possible. So it does take more time, but at the end, the 3D artist can get a lot out of it, and you can clearly see in the game that like it does make a difference. The game looks phenomenal.
Yeah,
visual wise.
Yeah, because also when we were talking about this, when we talked with Shadi, but then a lot of the times you're trying to push that level of realism because you're almost trying to get a one-for-one shot of what the game would look like in engine, right? You're trying to replicate that realism, and that in itself, with the technology obviously constantly evolving, is something that you're always trying to keep up with and try to catch up with. Because I mean, The Last of Us 2, even though people are saying it's shipping on PlayStation 4, which at this point the PlayStation 5 is around the corner, but then of course it's going to jump. So the technology is still being pushed even by them at this point at the end of the life cycle of the PlayStation 4. And I think even early on, it's great to see that One Pixel Brush has been pushing that. I mean, I had a conversation with some of the guys at Opus Arts back in the day, and they were talking about when they worked on Division even, they had certain concept kind of, bars that they were hitting to push the Division work. And then I think they got the first round of images from One Pixel Brush at the time, and the bar like exponentially jumped upwards because the images were just so good. So, I mean, is that something that you were always consciously aware? Is that something that you learned from Shadi, is like how you can go above and beyond when you're making these images?
So basically you're just talking about this kind of rumor or this idea, because I had this idea as well, is when you work at One Pixel Brush, you're going to get good automatically, right? That's kind of...
To an extent, yeah. Just that you're learning from Shadi will help you exponentially.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea. And obviously, I'm just, the way I said it is like the way I thought it was before I went there, right? And the moment you get there, it's just, at the end of the day, it's all about your own effort and input. The concept art images, if you can grade it right from a 1 to a 10, it's just like with any concept art work or image making for movie or game, I think at least, is just like an essay or a test, you can get away with the 5.5, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you rather go for the 8 or the 9. And
right,
that's
yeah,
the mentality at any company, and also at One Pixel Brush. If you really want to show that you can do good, you have to like work in your own free time outside of working for Shady. And we always took the extra mile to actually push every image we did. Like we treated every image as if it should be a bit better than the past one.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Because then, yeah.
I think the best way, the reason why it worked for me so well is because early on, as soon as I got in, I regrouped with everybody at that time that was working with One Pixel Brush. Like first, I thought like let's make a chat in Facebook. So we all made a chat, and then we all meet up at IFCC, and then we were talking about let's do a hangout, every day while we work. So it's like as soon as with this team effort and feedback, like when you take harsh feedback from each other, after a while you get used to it. You just see how phenomenal the results will be, because your images become images that you'd never expect yourself to see doing.
Right.
It's just every time when you're doubting yourself, this is the result of, not knowing which direction you want to go.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it's also interesting because when you're working on Pixel Brush, of course, yourself, you're working alongside guys like Florian and, not even just the guys at One Pixel Brush, but then you're also working with the guys technically at Naughty Dog, who are some of the best people in the world at what they do in that concept team. So I think it's just always a constant thing where you want to not just improve because you want yourself to be better, but then you've got to understand that you're working with these guys who are your peers, and you want, when the art blast happened and you want all these images to come out, you want your images to look like they belong with, Florence stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, it's just, for me, it's always been about team effort, as in, I never feel like I know better than the other one. If somebody gives me feedback which is honest, the truth that it's better, when it makes your image better, I used to take it super harsh, but now I'm like, that is a way to make the image better, but it's my choice if I want to do it or not. And usually I go for it because I know at the end I get super annoyed if I don't do that. And then I can't look at the image anymore because I get annoyed every time I get reminded of it.
Yeah. I mean, there'd be nothing worse if you'd worked on an image and not taking that feedback, and then it comes out, and then forever it's there, right? And you're always
exactly.
looking. Yeah.
Even till the end of this, like until last Monday, I'm still tweaking my images because I will always, like, for me, these are like my babies, and before you send your child off to school, you want them, to present them well and like have
of course,
make their hair and stuff. So for me, it's just I'm still tweaking it a bit because the game is already out. So the concept, and Naughty Dog is super, super, super great with us posting our concept art. Like that's so awesome that they're supporting artists as well.
Yeah, well, I just literally last night, because I got a bit of cash from a job, so I ordered the limited edition Last of Us art book. So that's going to take pride of place on my wall. I'll probably try and sneak it to a few events when they kick back up as well, so I can get you guys to sign them. But
awesome.
But yeah, man. So yeah, I mean, this whole journey of starting out and then your student, working at Gorilla, One Pixel Brush, this has been a phenomenal career so far. But then, when I initially spoke to you a couple of weeks back when we were setting up this interview, you told me that so you're not working exclusively with One Pixel Brush anymore?
It's been almost 3-4 months shy of a year now.
Right.
After that, I started working for a Guerrilla Game again on Horizon 2, but this time as a freelancer.
Right, external contractor.
Exactly, yeah. So I was there for a half year working on Horizon Forbidden West, which is also looking amazing.
Never knew. Well, congratulations on that, because it looks incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, I got to see the trailer, obviously, with everybody else when the PS5 stuff was announced, and I think everybody kind of knew it was coming, right? I think it was with the success of the first one, it was kind of obvious that Sony was going to relight that fire. But it does look incredible. So what's been? I mean, I don't know how much we could talk about your process on what you're doing just now, but do you feel like you're, I'm trying to think how to say this, do you feel like you're working the same process you did with Last of Us, is now you're working on Horizon. Is it?
No, that was the biggest. That was the biggest learning curve for me. Is every project has their own approach to it, and I think once you like switch from, because I spent like 2 to 3 years on Last of Us, so I really delved into it. But once you delve into something else, it does take time, and usually the company to adjust, and usually the company itself understands that as well. So for me, obviously, Last of Us is a bit more, realistic tones and a bit more somber and dark. So I had actually, and then I go to Horizon. It's like, you take like the saturation and just put it on like 50 or 60, just everything is more colorful and everything is more, Ghibli style. So it's definitely a switch. It was super, super hard for me. I'm not going to lie about that. As in understanding, it was my first time on my own without any like side person helping me like Shadi or something, so it's a lot of learning curve for me as a freelance concept artist, but it was also like I take a lot of great things out of it because I learned what not to do next time, or
Yeah, but then again, it's one of these things where, I mean, again, we were talking to Lee Petty back in the day when he was making stuff for like Brutal Legend with Tim Schafer. He was saying that the amount of stuff he was doing that was so dark, he had to go home and try and draw something bright just to make himself feel happier, because everything was so. I mean, like Last of Us, we all know, has this tone where it's not the happiest of stories. So for you switching onto this side of the production now, it's got to be a dramatic change even in just mood and tone, because the game itself is very different. But then, are you employing more painterly skills in these productions now because it's more of that ilk, or are you still working within Blender 3D? I mean, again, that's maybe a difficult process because, again, you're talking more about production, but is it challenging you as a painter in a different way? Or
yeah, it's like the thing I'm doing right now is just to know myself right now, and because I have the privilege of taking a step back and seeing what I want to do, is I noticed I do like the way I do images like Last of Us, so realistic lighting and stuff, and what you just said about like the somber stuff, like the dark stuff. I don't think any of us had that. It's just when you're making an image like images for Last of Us, when the lighting is spot on, it just feels so good to paint it. And we are all huge movie buffs who worked on it. So, like, I totally get why that person would say that. But for me, it was like a joy from day one till the end.
Yeah. No, I could imagine, because a lot of these images, I think if you took it out of the context of it was part of The Last of Us, are very, like, again, Killzone, the whole image, to me, seems very beautiful because you've got so much rolling nature and green trees, and look, the lovely horse. And I mean, the only thing I would say that adds to the mood that's darker is there's a lot of destroyed buildings, but that could be just like a destroyed building in Iowa or something anyway. I mean, it's not got to be because there's an apocalypse. But yeah, if you took a lot of these images outside of the context of it's a game about all this horrible stuff, a lot of these images are very beautiful, right? They're very well lit. There's a lot of sunlight in them in some of them. So yeah, I know what you mean when you're saying you didn't feel sad because you weren't then experiencing the story itself. You were taking small snippets of that and making your own approaches. But then it's great to see that, because you have got a range, right? When we talk about range and images, like even I think one of the first ones I saw that really like jumped out at me, and I didn't realize it was you, was the Mayan ruins scene you done.
Oh yeah.
Which for me was like one of the most beautiful images I think I've ever seen a concept artist do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. But then it reminded me very of that Ghibli animation, almost Spirited Away kind of thing. And there was so much, because you see your 3D base, but then you can see how much painting you've put on top of that. So like, I think when people look at artists who do specifically Last of Us 2 or things that are more 3D photo bash, they automatically think, this is more students I'm talking about, about, you can also do the painterly animation stuff that's outside of your range. So is that something you come across as an artist as well, that people will talk to you thinking that?
I mean, I thought that. Yeah, I thought that. Okay. Yeah, I thought that, like, it's totally legit, that thinking, because when I started doing art, I actually started as a character designer. I wanted to do character designs, and that I did that for like 5-6 years until I noticed that I want to do environments, and that was because of The Last of Us 1, when I saw that, and then they had like a video breakdown of the images on YouTube.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's so cool. I want to do that. And I thought like I never thought that learning the fundamentals is like you have to choose one direction in the beginning. So let's say I chose environments after that, right? So I chose to learn my fundamentals through doing environments. As soon as you learn these fundamentals like lighting and shape and value, you can automatically adjust them to other stuff as well. But my brain thought like, oh, every element has its own fundamental. You know what I mean? So the thing is as soon as you learn shape language and reference search again, then you know how to, like, for the mine image, for example, I did some reference research on Ghibli and see how they painted and how they treat their shapes, right?
Right.
And the form and values is something that's in general that you always practice. So every guy who does Last of Us images, maybe not every, but like 80%, 90%, especially the Naughty Dog guys, they are form masters, right? So if you look at Eitan, he can do super realistic, but also stylized because he knows his shapes and his forms.
Right.
So it's always, once you go back to the basis of fundamentals and you can break your image down like that, I think you can do anything you want, to be honest. Like at this point, I'm starting to do characters and I just picked up ZBrush because the beforehand, I didn't understand ZBrush because I didn't have a lot of 3D knowledge. But right now, because I tried a lot of 3D and like softwares like Blender, I know what a normal map means or what bump map means, or you know what I mean. Like I know all these terms, and before you didn't know that, so you would get lost. And like it's all these small things, like everything you want to do or achieve in the future, you have to tweak them towards what you want and not what the general audience think, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as well because you talked about even just your 3D process and going down that path because, you know, you also done the Tetsuo image as well, which was something you sculpted in Blender at the time, I think, but then I've not used the sculpting tools in Blender, but I've heard they're very akin to the ZBrush stuff, But yeah, so I mean, even that image was incredible to see because obviously you sculpted the character, you done the background, you done the whole paint over thing, more 3D than 2D, but still at the same time, like it was such an impressive image. But
thank you.
I think it's just I think your range is what has always impressed me, Danar, is the fact that you can turn your hand to almost anything. Because like you said, you went straight from The Last of Us onto Horizon, and again, like you said, there's such a shift even in just that. So it's always good to see, you know. And I think that's where the more successful artists land, is that if you have that kind of range and you can turn, you know, to most projects, then you're going to have a stellar career regardless because, you know, you're never going to be limited by your skill set. And I think that's something that I feel that students don't see enough of or pay enough attention to, is that you can have one style initially, but it doesn't mean like you're trapped in that genre forever, right? You don't have to always do the one type of painting. You can go above and beyond and take on different styles, right?
For sure. First of all, thank you for thinking that about me. It's funny how we perceive different stuff, right? Like for me, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm lost. I still don't know what I want. For you, you're like, oh wow, he's so versatile. So it's interesting how the different thought process is, you know, like never as a student as well, for everybody who's listening, it's like always understand and know your favorite artists are 10 times more insecure than you. Because
typically
it's always really, it's maybe easy to have a great project, but it's super hard to maintain that quality within that project.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like I had that idea as well as soon as I got The Last of Us, you know, and Shadi was like, excuse me, Shadi was like, oh yeah, okay, you got the image, here it is. And I'm like, all right, finally I got what I want in my life. And then I stood there, I'm like, oh fuck, I actually have to work as well, you know? So
yeah,
a lot of people ask for this opportunity, but I'm not sure if a lot of people are prepared for it, because I feel like in some areas I wasn't prepared, and I deeply learned from that. I got a lot of, you know, ups and downs, and, you know, images that weren't working and images that did. And, you know, it's always a struggle because you're always comparing. I used to compare myself with other people and still see myself do that a couple of times, but lately I'm trying to compare myself just with my older me, just to show that, okay, at least I could, because the issue is sometimes you're comparing your negatives with somebody else's positives, but you're never comparing your positives with somebody else's negatives. You're just looking at what you don't have and what the other has.
Yeah, and I think that's also about just being mindful as an artist, right? And just being aware of where you are in the industry and what your skill set is. And I mean, I know even for me early on, I mean, I remember going to my first event in like 2016, initial workshops in London, and looking at, Titus's work, and Ash Thorpe was there, and Aaron Beck, and all these amazing artists. And then at that time, I hadn't really seen much industry art, outside of what I was looking at. And it was just crazy to see how good these guys were, and they had these incredible paths and origin stories of what they'd done initially. But then I automatically went home and was like, right, all my art needs to look like theirs. I can't have any identity as an artist. I just need to make my stuff look like their stuff, and I'll get work. Yeah. And obviously that's the wrong way to do it. But when you're young, I think, especially when you're just starting in the industry, you always have that, right? You always look at other people's work and think, oh, if I was just a bit more like Eitan, or I was just a bit more like, like you do it to yourself, even though you know it's wrong, you're still in your mind sitting going, oh. But then you have to, like you said, I think it's the mindfulness, you have to catch yourself, right? You have to be like, no, my stuff's good. I know I'm a good artist. I know I can paint well. I don't have to be like them. They're amazing artists, but, I'm also an amazing artist. And I think it's like just self-love, right? It's just giving yourself a break to understand that you are good enough.
It's very much like that, because the difference is I can't compare my quality of work to somebody else who, like a rapper can't compare his work with somebody who's doing rock. And I noticed a lot of people in art are doing that with each other, so I think you have to really know which direction you want, because in the early stages where I didn't know, when I was doing character design and stuff, I just was doing images. And I didn't know who or where I want to work with. And as soon as the first game came out, I kind of knew the direction. And I thought, like, all right, every tutorial or every image that I make has to go towards that direction. Right. And just a small tip for everybody as well is, like, I've seen a lot of tutorials coming forth, and I've seen a lot of stuff on ArtStation, people just copying the tutorials. When you're watching a tutorial, always have an idea in mind, always have an image in mind, so that you can skip all the filler stuff that you don't need to know right now. Like, you will know those stuff once your image making asks for it. But taking a lot of information of one tutorial in one time or just copying the tutorial, it's not learning, in my opinion. It's just, you have to ask the questions of why did he make that choice, and not to ask the questions of how did you make that choice? What tools did you use? It doesn't matter. It's just, why did he use that tool? Why did he make that choice? Why is the lighting like that? Why is the character there? Why is the character... it's just the whys are way more important, in my opinion, than the how.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we just had this conversation when we interviewed Jan Urschel, and Jan was saying that, a lot of people understand that, it takes maybe like 10 hours, maybe less, to watch my tutorial that I've just released. But then it takes like 200 hours plus to implement that stuff, right? And make your own image. Because a lot of people think that, I've got mega scans now, I can make images in 5 minutes. It's like, well, no, it's not that simple. So, it's a very feel thing that you need to hone over many, many, many images. Like the first image you'll make will be shit, but then image number maybe 25 will be good. So, I mean, but you have to go through that process, right? You have to go through that trial.
Yeah, you have to. And that's the hardest process. It's like, there was this quote from the Rocky movie. It's not about how hard you can get hit. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and stand up.
And keep going.
Keep going, exactly. And keep going. Yeah. And that's the whole idea. It's just because you're going to get hit a lot of times. Everybody has that when you're doing 3D and one fucking button doesn't work and just the whole work just stops because you can't figure out that one fucking thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because when we spoke to Shadi again, he was talking about the flow, right? Because working in 3D even is a great process because it does a lot of great things. He is as an artist, but then at the same time, it kind of interrupts your flow because, you'll change one thing and then you've got to wait for it to render, or you change another thing and then you've got to wait for it to load or put it in the scene. So you're constantly interrupting that flow. You're always, getting in the middle of like that image just stopping every time. Yeah. So I think with that, it is a very frustration thing where you want to be good at the software, but then if Blender isn't doing what it's told the first 5 times, then you're like, oh God, I'm never using Blender again. But then it's the perseverance to stick with it and just keep going, even though it is frustrating, or even though it's maybe no, filling that artistic need. You have to look at the end result and know the immediate result is that, even when you become a concept artist, right, you weren't sitting day one in your college or university thinking, oh, I can't wait to work on Last of Us. You were just looking at like, well, I'm going to do well at school, then I might get into I think what I'm trying to say, Danar, is that the way I think I've looked at my career, and I think a lot of people look at the career, is that you can't look at the end goal. You're not seeing the bigger picture, and I think the more you try to control your career, or the more you try to like micromanage every single thing, because you don't know where you're going to land, but then eventually you will land somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's always like a sailor, right? You kind of know which direction you go, but you don't know exactly if it's there. And that's always the case. Is like for me personally as well, out of all the successes that I've had a shit ton of other emails. No, sorry, we're not looking for anybody. No, you don't require the quality or the requirements. It's all of this stuff that usually we don't tell other people, because when we're looking through Instagram, Facebook, or ArtStation, whatever, is because we're looking through our backstage to people who are in the spotlight, right? People show reel. Yep. Everything on ArtStation is people show reel on Instagram, and you're looking from the backstage and thinking, shit, I have to be like that. But you know that person also has a backstage, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird, because the thing is, we're just fighting our own mentality the whole time, and like the small voice in your head that just keep telling you like you can't do it. It's just I noticed that usually when stuff like that happens and I get frustrated, I just take a walk, or go off the PC and just take a break for an hour or something.
Yeah. I think especially because mental health now is such at the forefront of everybody's conversation now when it comes to this industry, because for a lot of years, even just a couple of years previously, industries, especially games, were synonymous with crunching or, working ridiculous hours. And sometimes it's not even like it's enforced. It's like people just feel that they need to be there 80 hours a week doing stuff. So I think it's more as you go on in the industry, or as the industry evolves, we're starting to think, no, we want a life outside of art. We want to, be able to spend time with our spouses or kids or whatever, it is outside of work. And it's hard because, again, Jan had the same conversation with me where he says, he now makes a conscious effort that, after a certain time he comes off the computer, or the weekends he doesn't even touch work. But then it took him a long time to get there, right? Because initially when he was working even at Lucas, he was so involved in his work that, he was never home. And he talked about like even having a father at that time who, was a workaholic, and he never saw him, and he didn't want that to be the same for his kids. So in this industry especially, I think it's a very difficult balance, right? It's having a life outside of your work.
For sure, man. And that's a balance that you have to learn yourself, and mistakes that you have to see for yourself, because a lot of people can warn you about it, but as long as you don't do it yourself and see why it doesn't work, right, you won't learn. Mm-hmm. You won't learn. So for me, it's as well as I still have a hard time trying to put it in like a good schedule, but I am trying, and it's all about trying.
Yeah, of course.
If you're trying and learning from the small mistakes before, it's gonna get okay. And just like you said, don't always plan too much, but never force it. Like always, when you're planning ahead, always expect too much, but so that you can always, there's always something to grab. There's always something to point towards that can keep you motivated.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting as well when you work on these. I think especially when you work at the tippity top, right? You're working on like the biggest projects in the world, Last of Us to the next Horizon game. These are things that, you almost have to take in consideration when you're going to work at these companies that, that's great. You get to work on these AAA titles, but then the AAA effort you're going to have to put in will be just as big. I mean, people always talked about, there was a really good saying where, if people want $100,000 job, you have to put $100,000 worth of effort in. You know what I mean?
Well said. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people want to work on Last of Us and have that opinion and whatever. But keep in mind that it's a lot of work and a lot of frustration and a lot of self-doubt.
Yeah. I mean, when we spoke to Shadi, I was stunned that it was like, I think we've done like 800 concepts in 4 years. I was like, oh my God, that's so many paintings.
Yeah.
Like, were you doing, I mean, do you know roughly how many you were doing kind of week to week or month to month? Was it like 10, 20 a month or something like that? Or
you mean hour-wise, right?
Yeah, well, no, I mean like individual images. Like, how many were you finishing? Like, I mean, because
right, that like that.
yeah,
I think like after a while we got to like 10 guys, so we got like each one image, sometimes two, and then we got like a week and a half with feedback and all.
right.
So it did still took like 5 to 6 days, or like sometimes less, like 3 days or something, but it's dependent on what kind of image you get and how clear Naughty Dog is about their vision within that image.
Mm-hmm.
So easily when you work like and I still have that, you can easily go up to 40 to 50 hours, 60 hours a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot, especially if you're sitting constantly on your computer, and then you're not even talking about the time you're sitting away from your computer, thinking about the image or thinking about how to interpolate that feedback and put it back into the next thing. And
that energy still stays there. You know what I mean? Like it still haunts your fucking house. So,
oh man,
exactly
so bad.
Yeah.
But then I mean, definitely once you finish that and you move on, you feel better for it because you're like, oh, look, I accomplished this amazing thing. But I think at every point in the human history is you always feel like you're at breaking point. You always feel like you're just about to snap and, oh, I can't push this image any further. I've been like 10 hours in it already. Oh my God, I'm getting sick looking at this thing. But then you finish it, right? And then you look at it and think, oh, wow, I've made that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And that usually takes like a couple of weeks or even months, you know, where you take a step back and you don't look at it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it's a weird relationship, man, between a creator and its creation.
Yeah, I think especially with concept, because I mean the 3D guys do whatever and whatever we talk about that's fair enough. But with concept, and because you're putting an artistic painter spin on it, whenever you paint anything, you're always putting so much of your own personal soul into that image. Like you're feeding it life. So I think when you get so connected to something, it's difficult. Again, talking to Shadi, even the first 5 minutes of that conversation, we were talking about what Neil must have been going through when a lot of the leaks happened.
Yeah, I saw. I heard it. Yeah.
And we were just talking about, like, you know, imagine working for a painting on 4 days and somebody tells you that they hate you. Like, but then imagine working on it for 4 years and then people shit.
Yeah.
So it's like, when a lot of these concepts come out. I mean, briefly, I don't want to dive too much into this because, you know, we don't want to, but, you know, looking at Frank Zung's work on the Abbey model and seeing a lot of the comments on that, it blows my mind because, you know, people are kind of going at him because of the design and stuff. But, you know, you're just part of that process, right? You're just part of that delivery system. You're not really getting involved in the nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah, I would say it's just, I wish that people or fans understand that there is a different relationship to your favorite characters from a fan point and from a creator's point.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I definitely feel like people can take things a little too far sometimes when it comes to critiquing this stuff, and because I mean, regardless of what you thought of the story and everything, artistically, the game is phenomenal. It's the bar. You know, the bar has now been set for every other game to look as good, to feel as good as that. Because Naughty Dog have made hit after hit after hit, right? Every game they release is always a timeless classic. Even in the Uncharted series, it was always incredible. So, I definitely feel that there's that disconnect that people have, and I mean, I've experienced it the same. I was a Star Wars fan all my life. I still am, but then of course I totally, you know, stood against the whole treatment of a lot of the actors and stuff after the like Last Jedi and stuff came out, and people were getting, I mean, and you know, I think people just need to obviously disconnect and remember that it's just an entertainment experience. It's not a lifelong thing, and it's not. But then I think also people get so attached to these stories and so attached to this stuff that you can kind of understand when they get upset if it's not quite how they saw it turning out. Because I mean, I know especially when I watched Star Wars, the last couple of ones, my experiences and my opinions were very mixed, but you know, I think because now I've worked in the industry, or at least I know people in the industry that have worked in these things, I understand how to disconnect myself and know, you know, get involved in it too deeply. So,
well said.
So, I mean, in closing, I think what I just wanted to say is that, you know, when it comes to people trying to get back in the industry or even make their first steps into you know, the genre or concept art, what do you feel is like, you know, if you could go back to younger you and give yourself advice, what would be the things you think of you've learned over the span of working on stuff like The Last of Us and Horizon, and what's the kind of key learning points you feel that you would give to yourself?
I would say just be just take some time to see what direction you actually want within gaming or concept art. So for me, it was always like, I want to work towards Naughty Dog. So I just looked at the guys that worked at Naughty Dog and tried to copy them. I just, and I can't say this enough, learn your fundamentals. It doesn't matter how good you are at 3D, at photo bashing. If you don't know your fundamentals, you won't understand why an image looks good or why a photo that you choose to photo bash is the right photo to photo bash.
Right.
You know, these are all things that will add up to your skill set in the long run. And outside of that, it's also just be more focused towards what you actually want. Because obviously, I also want to work on, I don't know, let's say World of Warcraft or Ghibli, but I have to focus on one thing. And as soon as you get there, and as soon as you get good at that one thing, you can finally take a step back and then try to focus on other things, you know?
Yes.
As an example, for me, I did a lot of environment art, and then finally I got to a level which I can sustain myself, and you know, I am happy with the results. Now I'm actually taking a step towards character design, because I can always keep working on my environment stuff until I can get my character stuff up. So it's always kind of like planning how you're going to approach this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see, again, something I thought early on is that once you have, because I came from industry where, you know, I was an engineer till I was 28.
Wow.
So
yeah.
I thought that I was always going to have that career until I left and went back to university and bettered myself. But, you know, chasing your dream obviously takes strife and determination. But you look at guys like Matthias Zemeka, who have, like, you know, very early in their career were doing, like, you know, a lot of 3D photo bashing stuff for like The Division and other games like that. But now he's like almost a Ghibli character artist. Like, he's doing backgrounds for 2D animations and storyboard and stuff. And but then that only came through once he had the job, once he had the initial learning and was doing other things, he could then refocus and do a different path. But
exactly, it's just because as soon as environment art becomes your work, you have to find a different type of hobby. Usually a hobby is something that you're learning while doing it, right? Because I noticed that as soon as I have my business mindset on, when I'm learning something, I'm like, okay, I have to do 3 hours of this today, and then tomorrow 3-4 hours, and like I'm just forcing something that is not me. And some people can be like that, but I am not like that, you know. And I do try to have a schedule of when I want to finish something, but it's not like there's just one way of finishing it, you know.
Okay, we totally lost you for like 5 seconds.
Oh, really? Sorry.
Yeah, you just keep cutting. Just where I think the general, when you were talking about I got the 3 to 4 hours, and then you were saying something else.
Oh, right. You know, when a lot of people are like, all right, 4 hours every day for a whole week, I'm going to do anatomy and nothing else.
Right.
For me, it's like, for me personally, it doesn't work like that. Like, you just have to tweak and find your own way. And, you know, just with fire, right? If you touch fire, you see how your body behaves and reacts to it. And then the next time you won't do it. So just behave like that with your work as well. See how you feel towards a certain way of working and see if that fits you, you know? Just tweak it towards who you are and not necessarily take it towards another artist you saw online doing that method. Yeah,
definitely. I feel like, you know, if you don't want to use Blender, fuck Blender. Like, you don't have to use Blender. It's not like, you know, people are like, oh, you know, you have to use Blender. You have to use Megascans. Like, no, you use whatever you feel is going to be your artistic voice. Because, you know, the thing I love about this podcast and the thing I love about having done it this last 4 years is that whenever you ask the question, how did you get in the industry? Everybody has a different answer. No one, like, you know, I was kind of like Yama's path where, you know, I worked in an industry all my life or most of my life. And then I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to leave and chase my dream. And I've done it. So like, that's one avenue. Then you went to school and you learned traditionally. So, you know, everybody has their own path. And it's the same when it comes to your artwork on ArtStation. You could sit on ArtStation all day and nearly every single image you click on, everybody has different styles. So, you know, again, we talked about with Shadi where you could people like TB Choi. And Choi was like, I'm going to draw characters. I'm not going to do anything else. This is what I want to do. I'm going to be really fucking good at anatomy and make that like my niche, my thing. And the career she's carved out for herself now is incredible. So, I mean, you've just got to find your voice as an artist, which I think is like the hardest thing initially, because there's so many conversations on how do I find my style or how do I find my voice. And it just takes time and doing the work, because you have to not only find what you love, but also what you don't love, what you don't enjoy doing. That's also a big part of it.
Very true, man. Very true.
Yeah. So I think that's a great kind of image or end goal, I think, for us to wrap up the conversation, because it has been so involved. I mean, I always love these when we get into these conversations, Danar. You know, I feel like we could talk another 2 to 3 hours
exactly,
just on the art industry in general and finding your voice. I mean, it's such a deep conversation to have with people. But yeah, we might try and get you back on at one point. We're doing a thing now where we're getting people back on at different points, so it would be great to maybe have you back on. But
yeah, sure. I'm always welcome. Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure.
Cool. So yeah, just thanks to you for coming on and giving up your time, Danar.
Thank you guys for taking the time to listen, and thank you for having me. Man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Of course. So yeah, for the guys who are listening out there, thanks again for tuning in and listening to the conversation. If you have any questions for Danar, or you want any feedback, or even just to talk to him in general, I'll leave all the social links below. You can get in contact with him. And then yeah, thanks again for listening. Stay tuned. We've got a couple of more guests coming up as always. We've got some really good guys lined up just around the bend. And if you could leave a comment, a like, or subscribe, that always helps the channel out, or share it with your friends. Wherever you're listening, you are on multiple different places, you know, most podcast services around the world. We also have a YouTube channel where we put video versions of this up, where you can see Danar's work if you want to see what he's been producing for Last of Us. And yeah, just to stick about. Thanks again to Danar for coming on, and thanks to you guys for
having me, man.
Indeed, and we'll catch you guys later.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, guys.
Cheers, bye.